come to you like I normally do, and I'm eager to get to you because there are a lot of things going on that we want to talk about. So I figured this morning would be a good morning. I'm traveling, and I thought it'd be a good morning to come and talk to you. There are a lot of things going on in America, and I certainly want to take note of the fact that over the weekend, African Americans were in Selma, Alabama, and the civil rights establishment were in Selma to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Bloody Sunday March, the march from Selma to Montgomery. And I always feel a particular affinity to that march. I feel a particular affinity to the events around the civil rights movement of 1963, 64, 65, because that's when I was born. And I think it's worth noting that for those of us who are 60, we are the first Black Americans that are born with full citizenship and rights. In fact, I wasn't. It was not until 1965 that the Voting Rights Act was passed because of the Selma to Montgomery March. And so I really can't say I was born with full citizenship. And then, of course, in 1968, the other very important piece of civil rights legislation, the Fair Housing Act. So if you were born 68, 69, really you are the first Americans to completely enjoy legally the rights of all citizens as African Americans. And I think that's very important. 69 was not a very long time ago, even though it's 60 years ago. In the consciousness of the American people, we still remember it. I think the Jets won the Super Bowl that year. Broadway Willie Namath made his mark. I think that year, around that time, Joe Frazier won the title, tournament title, the tournament that gave him the heavyweight championship. Of course, Muhammad Ali had vacated that title in his defiant and courageous stand, saying, I'm not going to Vietnam. Vietnam never called me a nigger, and I can't go fight when I don't have the rights of those who are fighting beside me. And I support that. I think that was courageous. After all, his father and uncles, black men that fought in World War I and World War II, they said, we're going to fight even though we don't have rights. And of course, that did not end up bearing fruit for them. And so for those who were born in the 40s, Ali, born in 42, I guess by the time they came of age in the 60s, they were saying, hey, we're not going. If we cannot be treated fairly with respect, if we cannot be honored, if we cannot be given our just due, we're not going. We're not going to fight. And so I say all that to say that the Selma to Montgomery March was a important march in the history of establishing the right to vote. We should always be mindful of the martyrs of Selma, principally Jimmy Lee Jackson, brother who was killed defending his mother by a sheriff, and Viola Louiso. She was a white Detroit housewife, and she was killed riding in an automobile after the march. We should be mindful of the courageous leaders, Amelia Boynton. We should be mindful of the leadership of John Lewis and Hosea Williams as they led the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and of course, the great Dr. King. And Selma would be the last major march. It would be the last unified major march. You had a large number of whites that came down from northern cities, and it was exactly 10 years prior that the civil rights movement had started in Montgomery. And so Selma, as they marched from Selma, a defiant George Wallace attempted to stop them at every turn. It would be the end. By the next year, the movement would bifurcate. Stokely Carmichael at the time would later become Kwame Ture, and Mukasa Willie Ricks would raise the cry, Black Power, and the Black Power movement, the Black Power emphasis, the Black Revolution, as it was called then, would start. And people would begin to question whether the tactics of the civil rights movement, the aims and the goals of the civil rights movement were indeed aims and goals that they should continue to focus. The Black Panthers were born not in Oakland, but in Lowndes County, Alabama, as the SNCC workers, as they marched from Selma to Montgomery, the SNCC workers began to organize in those counties in Alabama. And never forget this, for those of you who feel it's your God-given duty to fight and defend the title Democrat, no matter what. For those of you who think you've got to fight with all your heart to defend the Democrats, and the Democrats are angels and represent goodness and virtue and fighting the good fight. George Wallace was a Democrat. Don't ever forget that. I think people forget that. In fact, I think some people don't know that. And so we have to always understand in politics, there are no permanent enemies and there are no permanent friends. They're just permanent interests. We have to get around that mentality, because it was Democrats, the whole establishment, governmental establishment in Alabama. They were Democrats, and they were fighting our interest. And so as we look back on that, I also want to say that it's important to recognize how much change has taken place. That's very important to recognize that in fact, we are in a very privileged, advantaged position. And, for some reason, the civil rights establishment, civil rights leaders and preachers, they want to act as though Black people are constantly under assault. And I have analyzed that over the course of 40 years. I started working in this work with Reverend Jesse Jackson, and I have seen African American people face obstacles. I've seen African Americans literally have to engage the political process in various settings. But I'm also convinced that it's important for us to just recognize that the position we occupy today is not the same position of our forebearers. We do not face the peril that they face. And no matter how much we try to gin up emotions, gin up political discourse, gin up a sort of, I call it the Chicken Little syndrome. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. But it's like the boy who cried wolf, when you always predict doom and peril, then people begin to turn off because they've heard it all before. And I am convinced that the reason Black people in major cities of the country and the South have a pathetic attitude toward the political process is because instead of actually teaching our people what the political process looks like, how it can be effectively engaged, how it should be properly engaged, our leaders, first, out of necessity, sounded the alarm, racial solidarity. We were victims, largely being victimized by a legal system, a political system that disenfranchised us. Again, everything that was done by those in the 60s and 50s and 40s was certainly out of necessity. And I salute them unconditionally. They are the heroes. As far as black people are concerned, they are the greatest generation. But those who today draw what I consider inappropriate parallels to 1965, I think are doing the African American community a disservice, because we are not teaching our folks that in this country today, if you don't vote, it's because you're apathetic. And you see, the thing about telling people the truth, the thing about leveling with people, the thing about demanding something, agency of people, is that they get the message. And that's how in the 60s, we were able to overcome. We were able to face stiff opposition. Our people aren't fragile. We can vote even if they can't give us water in line. I mean, that's patently absurd. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's almost an insult to people who took life, limb, and they didn't have property. A lot of them didn't in those days. Some did. And they took all of that. They were willing to give all of that up in order to enjoy the sweet, precious right to vote. And they faced dogs and the Ku Klux Klan and the White Citizens Council and any enterprising white racist who was deathly afraid of black folks getting the right to vote and would have killed, maimed, brutalized, and often did our people for seeking enfranchisement. That's not going on today. Tell black people the truth. Oh, sure, there'll always be political machinations. The parties try to, through gerrymandering, through rules, they're constantly trying to gain advantage over the others. You know, here in New York, 3 years ago, the Democrats who are mostly in power in the state assembly and, of course, in New York City, did a redistricting effort and drew the lines so favorable to Democrats that a state court, decided that they had disenfranchised the Republicans. And they redrew the lines. That was Democrats seeking advantage through gerrymandering, through using the political machinations to attempt to gain political advantages over the Republicans in the state of New York. And Republicans do that as well, but that's not voter suppression. That's not disenfranchisement. What I'm saying to black folks, and I have run for office, I've worked on campaigns, I've knocked on doors in places like North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. I mean, I have done it all. And I've seen Negroes that did not go out to vote, and I didn't see any KKK. I didn't see anybody standing in their way. And so what I'm saying is we have to vote. We have to, as black people, we have to take agency. We have to stop crying. We have to stop moaning and groaning and talking about existential threats and just get organized, stick together, utilize our power. Right now, I'm in the Bronx, New York, and right now in New York City, we got more power than black people have ever had in New York City. And when you think about Selma, and you think about what black people have endured in this country to get the right to vote, and now we have the principal attorney in the state of New York is a black woman, Tish James. We have the ranking Democrat in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. We've got the mayor of New York City, Mayor Eric Adams. And you go down the list, public advocate. All of these, Bronx Borough president, district attorneys in Brooklyn and the Bronx and Manhattan. I mean, black political power is unprecedented. And we're about to give it all up. Or we're trying to give it all up. And we're trying to give it up not by voter suppression. If we lose City Hall, if Mayor Eric Adams loses City Hall, we lose access to capital, access to governmental positions that we've been excluded from. We lose access to international opportunities. We lose access to African Americans playing a major role in this global city, this global environment. And the question is, what is standing in our way if it's not us? What's the impediment? Who's making black politicians now scramble to cut deals? You got now a second African American candidate, Sister Adrienne Adams. She's the current speaker in New York City. But why couldn't she wait? I mean, why now? Why run when you have an African American, both named Adams? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. We undermine. It's no KKK. I heard Brother Sharpton this morning talk about disenfranchisement. There's nobody disenfranchising us but ourselves. I mean, he should be behind the mayor of New York City. We all should be organizing around the mayor to make sure that we hold on to this seat so that we can continue to empower ourselves in this city. And I'm not saying the mayor's perfect, because certainly he's made mistakes. But what mayor won't make mistakes? Who will come into that office and be perfect? Of course, no one. So we've got to stop blaming. I think that's the biggest impediment to black progress, is that it feels good to be the victim. It feels good to find someone to say they are responsible for our condition. And it's very painful to look in the mirror and say every time we make strides of progress, it's black disunity that undermines us. I've got a prediction. Now, as you know, Eric Adams has been basically completely vindicated. The judge that is looking at his case now invited an independent attorney in, and that attorney was supposed to look at the facts and see if, in fact, there was merit to the case or whether the case should be dropped. And I am very happy to tell you, an independent attorney said the charges should be dropped completely. Now, that is the opinion of an independent attorney that was called in to analyze that case and determine whether or not Eric had violated the law, and that indeed the Trump administration knew there was merit to the case. That's what the big hugalaboo was about. that these prosecutors had resigned, and they are people of integrity, quote unquote, and they resigned because the federal government, Department of Justice, told them to get rid of the case. And so the independent attorney said that there's no merit to the case. It should be dropped, and it should be dropped completely. It should be over. Well, two things. One, clears with press within his power. A judge has to make that decision. But what is in fact is that independent attorney did not come back and say, no, I don't think this case should be dropped. There's merit here. And so Eric has to be vindicated. And people continue to stand by and say, he's indicted, he's corrupt. You're just filled with bitterness, self-hatred. And really, if you're black and you're doing that, you're just trying to justify why you will vote for someone else. And there's a lot of you lining up around Cuomo. And let me just say this. First of all, I find it very hard to believe that you can say that you can't vote for Eric Adams because he's corrupt, but you can vote for Andrew Cuomo, who resigned his office in disgrace, who couldn't be prosecuted because of an obscure law while he sat in the governor's mansion, resigned in disgrace, sexual harassment, other controversies brewing, and to this date, over $28 million of the New York State taxpayers' monies have been spent on the defense of Governor Cuomo. And you mean to tell me, in good faith, New Yorkers of every color, race, especially working class people, which Eric represents, especially African Americans, you mean you can actually justify voting for Cuomo over Mayor Eric Adams? I don't think so. And so what I'm urging people to do, take some stock of the progress we've made. Think about Selma and how hard. Think about how John Lewis and Hosea Williams, as they stood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, being beaten, and others, Andy Young, Reverend Jackson. Just think about how they never could have imagined that 900 miles away up in New York City, an African American would sit in Gracie Mansion and in City Hall, saw us literally give sort of take stock of this moment. Bloody Sunday. I'm urging you and I to reflect on that this Monday morning and really consider what it means to hold political power. I want every preacher to think about, what is your role? You say, well, Eric's compromised. People don't think he can win. Well, it's your job to teach people that he can. It's your job to tell people, if they go out, if they vote, he can win. It's your job to interpret to them matters of justice. After all, it is us that talk about and teach about the prophets of old, just men and women of the scriptures that were accused and persecuted falsely. And that's what we have today. Folk got upset, as Eric said, he felt like he was being crucified. Well, Jesus was crucified. And since most of us have some image of him up on that cross. Some denominations and faiths wear the crucifix. That crucifixion belongs to us. It was Jesus's for our sake. And which of us haven't used the same kind of metaphor when we were going through difficult times? We felt like we were being unjustly persecuted. We were being persecuted for something we did not do. And that's all he was saying. Stop fault finding. Let's stick together. Because if we don't stick together and hold on and maintain power, then it will be almost as though never existed. See, you all want to blame Trump and the Republicans as though this man being in office has radically changed your life and landscape. No. What we should be constantly focused on is black people's inability to stick together and put together a programmatic thrust and move forward like everybody else in America. That's our biggest impediment. If we came together, Trump would be of no obstacle to black people. On the economic front, if we supported each other, if we had a vision, you don't have to boycott Target. You can if you want. But what good is boycotting Target until they do what? What is the ultimate goal? I mean, you stop shopping for a few months. And then 6 months later or 3 months later, back in there spending millions. Why not organize and say, you know, we need to create. Today, it's easier than ever. Some of our business people get together and say, everything is online now. Let's go down south. Let's go to some depressed areas of the country. Buy acres of land and buy warehouses and create a competitor to Amazon. The business model's there. We can do it. And nobody can stand in our way. And so that's my position. That's my hope. That's really what my prescription is. And it's a victorious story. It's a story of empowerment. I'm just tired of hearing these mealy-mouthed messages of what somebody's doing to us, of what they won't let us do, what they, who in the hell is the they? What about us? That's what we need to be focused on. And let's start right here in New York City. Stop playing with Andrew Cuomo. These other. Only one man in this race that's been mayor of New York City, and that's Eric Adams. Let's stick with him, hold on to New York, and then let's work on, instead of being angry and boycotting for a few months, because when you boycott for a few months, okay, you're showing a company what your purchasing power is, but that's still not leveraging your your purchasing power to do anything for yourself. And I believe Target knows that. I believe they know that in 6 months, whatever they lost, they'll get back. And so you got to think about that. And I don't think we often think about that. We often, get excited. I was talking to a brother last night about this whole emotional reaction to Trump. Emotions are feelings, and they're important feelings. And emotions are extremely important. When you express love, you express hurt, pain, anger, joy, indifference, excitement. I mean, emotions are extremely important. They just don't belong in the political analysis. We have to be thinkers. We have to think. We have to strategize. You know, a warrior cannot afford to be emotional. You cannot run out on the battlefield just because you're angry, pounding your chest and say to the enemy, I'm here, come on out and meet me. Some sniper will sit 400 feet, 600 feet, 1,000 feet away and put a bullet through your chest or your forehead. And so you have to be strategic. You have to think. You have to be courageous, but you can't be emotional. Same way with politics. Just the burning anger at Trump, the burning anger at Elon Musk. What good is it going to do? It will do nothing. It doesn't do a thing. It just makes you filled with anxiety. And for 4 years, he's going to be the president. The question is, what do we do to advance African Americans during that time and during all times? And when we do, I guarantee you when we do that, then we will have candidates that we support, that we like, but we'll never have anxiety over somebody winning. You know, white people don't, unless you're talking about the white left, extreme left, and a lot of those folks are neurotic. A lot of them, you know, for them, politics is a sport. Either they're young and they are very idealistic, they're ideologues, doctrinaire, or they're very wealthy, and at the end of the day, I feel passionate about this, but it's not going to affect my bottom line. But most people who are well-adjusted, working class, middle class people, to them, the person who wins the presidency is of interest if they're voters, but only of marginal interest. In the black community, we literally act like life and death depends on whether the Democrats win or lose. And it's an absurd state of being for African Americans. And we just continuously led and goaded into this mentality. And it hurts us. You know, it really does. It robs us of our agency, robs us of our dignity. President the other night highlighted the Lincoln Riley, the young lady that was killed in Georgia. Who would not have compassion for them? The young lady was at college, jogging, and she was sat upon, beaten, raped, and killed by an illegal immigrant. Who couldn't identify with the pain of the family? And Democrats could not bring themselves to even politely applaud for this family. And then, of course, young Officer DJ, little brother from Chicago, 13-year-old. This little guy, man, if he doesn't steal your heart or melt your heart, you don't have a heart. Brother's been through hell and back, fighting cancer. He has always, little Texan, I think he's from Texas, he's always had a fascination with being a police officer. That's not uncommon for boys. We grew up playing with G.I. Joes, and we grew up playing cops and robbers. So that's not unusual for a boy. He's got all kind of uniforms. And President Trump celebrated that young man before the nation, made him an honorary Secret Service member. I mean, it was a very emotional moment. Uh, if you got a heart, and to think that black elected officials sat there on their hands and didn't clap for that black young boy to please white liberals is disgusting to me. And it is probably one of the most, I can only say, it was probably one of the most Uncle Tom moments in the history of America. You're going to ignore your black child so that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer don't look askance.
Estimated time in traffic, 9 minutes.
And yet, when Donald Trump, the same Donald Trump that you hate so much that you can't bear even to clap for a young black child, when Donald Trump moved the Israeli embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, Chuck Schumer was there, standing right next to Donald Trump. And see, we don't have sense enough to differentiate our interest from the interest of the Democratic Party. We don't have sense enough to do that. And that's to our own peril. And so, if you want to let the Democrats make you think you're doing something by being filled with anger, filled with hate, filled with anxiety. I loved when I was growing up boxing to get into a fight with somebody that was just angry, coming at me, swinging wildly, flailing. That was what you wanted, because all I was going to do is sit back and pick him off, pick my shots, beat him to the punch, because he's not boxing, he's fighting, running out like a wild man. And when you're not thinking, you can't engage in any battle. And let me tell you, black folks, you're not thinking today. You are emotionally invested in the fact that Trump won, and you're going to be exhausted after 4 years. You're going to be exhausted. And we will not have made the progress that we could if we just sat back, accepted the facts. I was talking to someone yesterday, and merely saying that I would have clapped for DJ led this otherwise extremely good and rational woman to say, are you going to normalize Trump? How can I? What do you mean, am I going to normalize him? What power do I have to normalize him or abnormalize him? To validate him or invalidate him? What power do I have to do that? And he's sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and will be for 4 years. It's just ridiculous. It's patently absurd. And I have studied this. The black community, we are the shock troops of the Democratic Party. Keep us angry when they lose, and we'll be belligerent. We'll sit and stew for 4 years. We'll fight. We'll run our mouths. That's all we're really doing. Everything's very performative. Jasmine Crockett, she's engaged in performative nonsense. Al Green, performative nonsense. No plan, no action, no rational response. And let me just say lastly to our elected officials who want to play Malcolm X. You see, you want it both ways. Same with the academicians. You want to work at Harvard and Yale and Princeton. You want to be a U.S. congressman and in the Senate and play like you're a real movement leader and play like you are just really risking it all. Man, woman, you aren't risking anything. To think of someone and remember those who risk something. Think about Selma. Dr. King, when he died, he didn't have the health care package that the average congressperson has, or Princeton professor, Harvard professor. He didn't have the income, steady income. He wasn't making $200,000 or $300,000 a year, $150,000, $175,000 a year, as you are. He didn't have police protection. He didn't have access to basically insider trading information. And in fact, he did have access to a lot of money. He won the Nobel Peace Prize, which he could have selfishly used for himself, but he divided it among the civil rights organizations. And he died poor. So did Brother Malcolm. And so did many of the movement strugglers that we remember, Stokely Carmichael and others, Ray. And so let the leaders, let the strugglers have their just due. And legislators, you just go in and legislate. Your job is easy. They made it easy. They put you in a prime position where you go and sit down with Democrats and Republicans, and in an intelligent, rational way, fight and advocate for our people. We don't need you to don kente cloth and kneel. We don't need you to sing "We Shall Overcome" in the well of the House. We don't need you acting ratchet on the floor of the House and in committee meetings. Do your job. I imagine you are all aware of Adam Clayton Powell. Clayton Powell was many things, but above all, Clayton Powell was a great legislator. Passed over 60 bills. That's what you're there to do. Clayton Powell understood his role was to pass legislation that would be beneficial to African American people. And that meant he had to work with Republicans. That's just the way it is in Congress. That's just, politics is about compromise. Don't get in front of black people and put on a performative show. Well, no compromise. Stop lying to the people. That's what politics is. It is compromise. But you want to get the best compromises and the best possible deal for our people. Do your job. Let the activists, let the ministers, let those who are outside of the system do our job and you do yours. Or we're going to call you to account because you're lulling our people to sleep. You're lulling our people to sleep with political miseducation, performative, substantiveless actions, and trying to gin up and focus our people's anger at the President of the United States for 4 years, so that by the time you finally get a Democratic candidate, they will have held their breath and not done one thing to engage the political process in 4 years. And then they'll vote for a Democrat in the next presidential election or in the House election in 2 years, the midterm elections. So tune in to Conversations with Conrad. Tune in to these sort of morning musings. And I will be very happy to always share with you my version of the truth or what I see. I don't say it is the truth, but it will give you a different perspective. than what you're normally getting. When I formally do my show, we begin by saying, not from the right, not from the left, but common sense from an African American perspective. And that's what we need. We need common sense. We need the ability to think rationally. And the more we think rationally, the better off we as a people will be. So thank you for listening this morning, and I hope to see you again soon in the formal edition of Conversations with Conrad. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. I thank you, those of you who have tuned in during this hour. Have a great evening. Great day, rather. Jonathan Brown, you say you can't agree. You can't agree. Well, that's fine. We all have our opinions, and that's fine. What do you disagree about? Okay. All right. Now, please tell me. I was going to go, but I'd love to know what you disagree with. It would be very helpful for me to understand. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Jonathan Brown, I guess you're typing. I'd love to know. What did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? What is it that you don't agree with? I'll give it a minute. Actually, I'm at 48 minutes. I thought I was at an hour, but I normally like to stay with you about an hour in the morning. I am now in Brooklyn, New York, and in the car a few more moments. All right, well, that's it. I thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.